Hey guys, everything new under the sun. I'm going to try and record with the audio, the microphone, the built-in microphone, I should say, on my iMac. I did the other two videos this morning. Of course, my Blue Yeti microphone, which I usually use, has died. Unfortunately, that's the microphone I use for all my videos, actually, and it has much better sound, obviously, and there's a lot of complaints with it. So I'm going to do a video with that and see if anybody can help me. But if you have any suggestions for fixing a Blue Yeti, I think it's a USB port on it, a connection that maybe got broken, because I don't know what else, what other part of the microphone might die. But anyways, that video you should see tomorrow, hopefully, if I can get it that out, and hopefully we'll get that fixed up for you guys. I want to redo this video, which I posted earlier today, but obviously there was no sound in it. So I want to have a read through it at zerohedge.com. Martin Armstrong warns World War III looms in Eastern European tensions. Alright, so let's get to it here. Audio seems to be working. Europe could become the site of a new global war in the East as tensions build there against refugees and the economic decline that fosters old wounds. The EU is deeply divided over the refugee issue, and thus it is fueling its own demise and has failed to be a stabilizing force. Could the confluence of economic trouble brought on by the migrants and just the plain debt of Western society, could that bring on World War III? And I think an economic collapse is really probably the trigger event, the key event that's really going to bring us all to a point where we will accept a one world leader and a mark of the beast system. So I think the economy really is kind of the kingpin that holds everything, or that starts the ball rolling on the World War III and all the other prophetic things, all the biblical wars. After 1 month, the people have been rising up, saying, we can't trust this new government. And you can see them protesting there in the streets in that image there. On the eastern border of the EU, only a few hundred miles from Berlin, as well as Vienna, there is a growing danger that the world will stumble into global war. The leading cause is primarily stemming from the incompetence of the politicians in the EU as well as the East. The EU is more concerned about punishing Britain and trying to hold on to overpaid political jobs than to address the real issues facing Europe. Then they go on to talk about the problem with NATO, and of course the US is complaining that countries aren't paying their way in NATO. The U.S. is footing the bill for lots of stuff. I think the demise of NATO, if that occurs, could be the thing that allows Russia to march into Israel, the Gog Magog. If the U.S. is fed up with people funding it, or actually more likely is if the U.S. goes into an economic collapse of some sort, they just don't have the will because they don't want to spend the money, or they have so much debt that it just weighs them down, that they have an economic crisis internally, as what other Western countries will. Could that bring down NATO? Could that render NATO useless effectively? And then Russia says, well, there's no more NATO because it was the U.S. paying for it anyways. The U.S. doesn't want to pay for it anymore, or can't pay for it, so we're going to be able to march into Israel, and nobody's going to tell us what to do in the Middle East anymore, because Europe is in civil war, civil unrest. They have no money, economic collapse, migrants. The U.S. is in economic collapse, or they don't have a government that is interested at all to go to war. And so they can do whatever they want at that point, basically. This also raises the most serious question: exactly where does the power of NATO end and Russian power take over, effectively, is what it means. Effectively, where precisely is the border of influence? And I think that's what I'm talking about. The border of influence will shift significantly out of the Middle East. Russia will have huge borders of influence in the Middle East, and probably a lot of Eastern Europe, if not over all of Europe, if Britain and the US can't continue to effectively shoulder the weight of NATO, and probably the US specifically, because they pay for a huge percentage of the military expenditure. And so you can see they've got images of all the people through history playing war games, a game of risk trying to take over society. The annexation of Crimea Peninsula by Russia in 2014 is seen as a trigger of the crisis, and Russia is described as an aggressor. But Crimea was always Russian territory, and it was given to Ukraine back in 1954. What if Spain wanted Puerto Rico back? It's not part of the United States. So that's a continuing concern. Obviously Ukraine, the battle, the border there is still a brewing thing. The issue overall, I guess, it says politicians have been carving up the world for a very long time. People mean nothing, and it goes on. The EU is no longer an economic community, but a political union that is closely linked to NATO. So again, if there's an economic collapse, there won't be any more NATO, and they won't be able to be in NATO because they can't pay for it. There is no way the U.S. would give up the Pacific military base in Japan at Okinawa, yet we impose sanctions upon Russia for annexing its original territory pre-Ukraine, where it maintains its Black Sea Fleet, which is stationed at Crimea, in Crimea. You have this battle between U.S. and Russia and NATO in general. Russia doesn't like NATO advancing on its borders and encroaching its territory as it gets into the Baltic states and that sort of thing, gains influence. I think generally what is really going to push a Bible prophecy forward, is there going to be World War III? Yeah, there will be. I think we're going to see a bunch of sort of smaller wars first as an economic collapse, probably, which happens in the Western world, including the U.S., brings down NATO, and it opens up the area for Russia, like I say, to move into the Middle East, to exert their power as they see fit, effectively. And then all those Isaiah 17, destruction of Damascus, and Gog Magog, Ezekiel 38, Psalm 83, all these things start falling like dominoes, because you take NATO out of it, the balance of power, and then you have an imbalance of just Russia in the area with Israel. But Israel's, of course, trying to hold back, not doing anything, trying not to get into World War III. And you have the exact setup. So as I said all along, I think an economic collapse is what really triggers all the other events to occur. And every day it makes more and more sense to me that that is the trigger point. So I wanted to bring that to you. Is Martin Armstrong right? Is there going to be World War III in Europe? Well, I think World War III is going to happen around Israel. We will see a World War III at the very end of days, after the end of the millennial reign of Christ, when all the people who are still against Christ come and join up in the final battle. We'll also have all nations in these end times in the next couple of years joining in the valley of Armageddon and fighting many of the prophetic battles that will occur there. So in that sort of a way, you will have all nations of the world in the Middle East, looking at the Middle East, focused on the Middle East, and considering Israel a burdensome stone as well. All the nations will hate Israel. That's what the Bible says. So I will leave it there, guys. Yes, I think eventually World War III is going to come. I don't know if it's going to come the way Martin Armstrong thinks, but it's an interesting article nonetheless, and I will put a link in the description. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video.